All right, Pierre, thanks very much for joining us. It's not every day that we get the Leader of the Opposition and potential next Prime Minister of Canada in our studio, so thanks for coming. But with those titles, how much pressure do you put on yourself?
A fair amount. It's a big job and there's a lot at stake. We really have to bring it home for our country. I mean, people are suffering. I've never seen it this bad after 8 years of Trudeau, 40-year highs in inflation. I meet moms who can't afford food for their kids. 1 in 5 Canadians are skipping meals. Seniors can't heat their homes with this carbon tax. And of course, our young people are living in their parents' basements until they're 35 because the cost of housing has doubled under Trudeau. And so there's a lot of pressure on me to bring it home for all these people, these hardworking people who really want to restore Canada's promise. I feel a great burden, but a worthwhile one to champion them and to bring home a Canada that allows them to benefit from their own hard work.
What could you do for those Canadians as Prime Minister?
Well, let's start with housing. Right now we have the fewest houses per capita of any country in the G7, and that's why we have such incredibly high house prices after 8 years of Trudeau. So we need to knock down the government gatekeepers that block home construction. Municipal bureaucrats and politicians stop construction and therefore reduce the number of houses. About $300,000 to $600,000 of the cost of every new house in Canada is the result of government bureaucracy blocking construction. So what I'm going to do is require big cities to speed up and lower the cost of building permits and include high-density housing around every federally funded transit station so that young people can live right next to a bus or train. I'm going to sell off 15% of federal buildings and some federal lands to turn that into high-density housing. I'm going to back the building trades, not just university education, but building trades. So we have the builders to build the houses. We're going to build millions of new homes. And when Pierre Poilievre is Prime Minister, young people will be able to afford to live in them. I'm going to get rid of the carbon tax that Trudeau and the NDP want to triple. So that'll bring down the cost of fuel, food, and heating. Finally, we're going to make work pay. It doesn't pay to work in Canada right now because you lose so much of each extra dollar you earn to taxes and clawback. So I'm going to reform those taxes, cut back on the cost of government so that you bring home more of each dollar you earn.
How do you do that while still tackling the deficit?
Well, we've got to cancel the outrageous waste in the Trudeau government. You know, he's spending $21 billion a year on high-priced consultants. That's $1,400 for every Hamilton family. Every year goes to pay for federal government consultants when we already have a massive bureaucracy that could be doing the same work in-house. So I'm going to fire the high-priced consultants, bring the work in-house. I'm going to cancel wasteful things like the ArriveCan app, $54 million down the drain for absolutely nothing. I'm going to cap government spending with a law that says we must find $1 of savings for every new dollar of spending. The same way a household runs their finances, I'm going to run my government because Canadians have been pinching their pennies long enough. It's time politicians pinch their pennies too.
Now, locally, we've just spoken with Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati, who says there's a migrant issue in his city where migrants are coming in, taking up hotel space, valuable hotel space that would be taken up by tourists in the summertime. What would you do to resolve the migrant problem in this country? Very
simple, close Roxham Road. That's the problem. After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, our immigration system is broken. You got 1 million lawful immigrants who have been applying illegally to come here the right way, waiting longer than the acceptable wait time. Meanwhile, Trudeau and the NDP encourage them to cross illegally at Roxham Road, and then Trudeau is then putting them on buses and bringing them over to Ontario, where they are then put in hotels funded by taxpayers and hurting our local economy. So I believe in lawful immigration. My wife's a refugee. I think immigration is great. We have to do it lawfully, and it has to be to serve our economy and our country. So bring back lawful immigration by closing Roxham Road.
Now, recently, 2 local Conservative MPs met with a German politician with extreme views, Nazi views as well. How did that meeting even happen, and what was the conversation like with the MPs afterwards that you had with them?
Well, I disagree with this politician, and I said so, and because I believe in freedom for everyone, and that includes immigrants and minorities. And I speak out against racism of all types, so especially the hideous and ugly racism of Justin Trudeau, who dressed up in racist costumes so many times. He says he can't remember them all, who gave taxpayer money to anti-Semitic and racist organizations under the pretext of fighting racism. So we really have to get, we really have to get the truth from Justin Trudeau on how many times he wore these racist outfits.
But what does it say? What does it say about your MPs who would meet with somebody like this?
Well, I mean, they've said that they weren't aware of all of her views, and that is the reason why they had the meeting. But certainly, like for example, I have to meet with a guy who's been has an ugly racist past. His name is Justin Trudeau. And frankly, I don't think there's any other member of parliament who has such ugly racist past actions as Trudeau. Dressing up in costumes that degrade minorities, it's disgusting. And I'll tell you something, I want to make a commitment right here. If I ever find out that any of my candidates have dressed up in racist blackface outfits like Trudeau, I'll kick them out.
Now, Anderson has said that it's impossible that those MPs and yourself didn't know of her views and her history because she's got videos posted all over the internet.
Yeah, I don't watch videos all over the internet. I'm busy working for people. So, I mean, these are the, liberals might spend their time reading and watching videos online. I spend my time fighting for the hardworking people who pay the bills in this nation. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this a country that works for the people who do the work, the people who are shut out of our society, the working class folks here in the steel town who deserve a champion.
Where do you stand on human rights, you and your party on 2S LGBTQ, human rights, women's rights, things like that?
I'm in favor of freedom and opportunity for everybody.
Regardless of?
Yeah, I don't care. I don't know. Why would I care about individual attributes? People should be able to make their own decisions, live their own lives. Love is love. Marry who you want. Make your own decisions. We should be absolutely colorblind in our decisions and how we treat people. It should be equality under the law. We should judge people, as Martin Luther King said, by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or any other irrelevant characteristic.
There's always been a fraught relationship with First Nations people and the country and the government of Canada. How would you, as Prime Minister, mend that relationship?
Well, look, I think the problem is that we have a top-down, Ottawa knows best system that imposes decisions by bureaucrats, politicians, and lobbyists in the capital on the First Nations people. And we need to empower First Nations to take back control of their own decisions, their land, their money, and their resources. And that's why I'm working right now with First Nations on a policy that would allow them to collect the revenue resources that come from their lands, rather than having it sent to Ottawa and then have to go and ask politicians for some of it back. We don't need more powerful politicians in Ottawa. We need First Nations to have the freedom to make their own decisions with their money and their lives, and that's what a Poilievre government will do.
Just a 25-minute drive from here, we've got continued land disputes between First Nations and the government. Do you think it's a provincial problem or a federal problem to solve the treaty issues that there are right now?
Well, it depends on the situation. Some of them have federal disputes, some have provincial disputes. But the bottom line is we've got to solve this so that we can spend less money on lawyers and more money to giving clean drinking water to First Nations children. And also, we have to develop resources. First Nations want to develop resources. The environmental nut bars want to stand in the way of the opportunity for First Nations. The NDP and Liberals want to keep First Nations dependent on the federal government. I'm the opposite. I believe First Nations should have the freedom to develop their resources. I talked to some First Nations from Northern Ontario who want to develop the Ring of Fire to mine the minerals of the future, but they've spent $50 million trying to get a permit for a highway that hasn't even started building. This is the government gatekeeping that stands in the way of our First Nations and keeps them in poverty. I will get those gatekeepers out of the way and stand with First Nations who want to take control of their lives.
All right, moving on. What is your take on healthcare, and how would you improve it under your watch?
Well, first is we need a growing economy that can fund our healthcare system. And under the previous Conservative government, we increased health funding 6% every single year. But after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, our healthcare system has never been worse. The lines are growing, the system is bursting. And the obvious, easy way to bring in more doctors and nurses into the system is to license the immigrants we have here already that are qualified to do that, but are prevented from doing so. Only 41% of immigrant doctors and 39% of immigrant nurses get a license to practice because of gatekeepers who prevent them from working. We're going to bring in a system with the provinces that within 60 days of an immigrant applying to work in the medical profession, they should get a yes or no based on their tested ability, not based on where they come from. We're going to make it possible for future immigrants to work on getting their license before they even arrive. And we're going to speed up the approval of medical breakthroughs that are seeking federal government approval from Health Canada so that our people get the best care at the fastest rate.
Now, you've been quite vocal lately about the opiate epidemic in this country and some of the solutions that are in place right now, safe injection sites, things like that. What do you think the problem is in this country, and do you think safe injection sites are the solution?
No, and the problem is that after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, we've had 30,000 people die of overdoses. His policies have failed.
What would you do differently?
Well, for one, I would reverse the Trudeau NDP plan to legalize heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, and other deadly drugs. He's brought in a pilot project, by the way, Trudeau has, so we now have a laboratory for his policy. Pilot project in Vancouver. He's effectively legalized heroin and fentanyl. We've seen a 300% increase in overdose deaths as a result. Tent cities in the lower east side of Vancouver, central Vancouver, where people lie face first on the ground, 6 dying every single day in BC of overdoses. And then they're providing taxpayer-funded drugs, which then addicts resell so that they can buy even more potent drugs. Just this week, we found the Trudeau government gave out a permit for a corporation to manufacture and sell cocaine. It only took 2 months for them to get that permit. Under Justin Trudeau, it's faster to get a permit to sell cocaine than it is to get a passport. So a Poilievre government is going to ban cocaine, crack, heroin, and fentanyl. We're going to use the money instead to put people in treatment, in inpatient treatment, where they get detox counseling. They're separated from their addiction for 90 days and they can take back control of their lives. And we're going to make the drug companies pay for it. They're the ones that flooded our communities with these opioids. They lied about how lethal those drugs were. They knew exactly what they were doing. I'm going to sue them the same way that we sued the tobacco companies years ago. And I'm going to get that money and I'm going to use it to pay for treatment to save the lives of our brothers and sisters.
How hard is it to get that treatment right now in this country?
Very hard. It's much easier to get government-funded drugs and narcotics than it is to get help with treatment. The people have to wait 10, 12 months to get a bed somewhere, or they have to pay $30,000 or $40,000 for a program. That's outrageous. We should, instead of spending money giving people drugs, we should spend money giving them treatment, and that's what a Poilievre government will do.
All right, moving on. How big of a factor do you think Chinese interference was in the last election, and why do you think Trudeau hasn't called for an inquiry yet?
Well, because he's got something to hide. We now know that for 10 years, Beijing's authoritarian dictatorship has been targeting Justin Trudeau with support and influence. They gave $200,000 to the Trudeau Foundation. And around that time, Trudeau said he admires the basic Chinese dictatorship. We know now that Beijing interfered in two successive elections to help Justin Trudeau win. So he's enjoyed that support. He's benefited from it. He's known all about it. He's had all the briefings, and yet he's done absolutely nothing. Why? Because he benefits from it. He and his corporate liberal pals have been making fortunes off of doing business with Beijing, and they don't want those good times to come to an end. Well, they will come to an end when I am Prime Minister. I'll bring in a foreign influence registry requiring anyone paid by a foreign government to influence our politics to register their names publicly. I'll strengthen espionage laws and bring in tougher penalties for anyone who engages in spying or manipulation of our government on behalf of a foreign regime. And I'll rebuild our industries. We're going to bring home our industries to Canada again. Here in Steeltown, we need to be able to produce our own stuff, mine our own minerals, produce our own steel, build our own homes so that we don't have to rely on foreign dictatorships to do it for us.
Some of the answers that you've just given, sounds like you believe in policing and you would increase police budgets across the country, or the need for police budgets across the country, or the desire for police budgets to increase across the country. Your thoughts on that?
I do support the police 100%. And frankly, the radical agenda of the NDP and Liberal politicians who attack our police is one of the reasons why we've seen a 32% increase in violent crime under Justin Trudeau, a 92% increase in violent gang killings under Justin Trudeau. Their policies have failed. The catch and release system, which allows multiple releases of the same offender in the same day, I mean that more and more crime is taking over our streets. In Vancouver, for example, the same 40 people were arrested 6,000 times in a year. 150 arrests per person per year. Why? Because they're released on Justin Trudeau's bail system, and then they reoffend. If you're a multiple repeat violent offender and you get charged again, you should stay in jail until your trial and until your sentence is done. So I'll get rid of the radical anti-police catch and release policies of the NDP and Liberals and bring home safe streets for our people.
All right, where do you stand on social media versus traditional news media?
I'm for freedom.
All right, so asking you about Bill C-11, the new Broadcasting Act, which would make foreign streamers pay into the Canadian content system, and Bill C-18, which would force Facebook and Google, who together own nearly all of the ad market now, to pay into the production of Canadian journalism. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let's start with C-11. This is a censorship law. This would give the CRTC the ability to censor what you see and say online. And they will decide what is Canadian content. What is Canadian content? If a mom here in Hamilton posts about a bottle drive for the local hockey club, is that Canadian content? Well, not according to the government. Even though she's Canadian, it's about a Canadian story. It's a Canadian charity, a Canadian hockey team. But that's not Canadian. What is Canadian is a CBC report out of Washington, D.C. about American politics that effectively plagiarizes something you could have seen on CNN. What effectively Trudeau's trying to do is allow woke, politically correct content to supersede the voices of everyday Canadians. I believe we have 37 million regulators of the internet in Canada already. They're called citizens, and they should be able to decide what they watch, when they watch it, how they watch it, and it should not be up to a bunch of gatekeepers at the CRTC or in the government to dictate to them. That's what I meant when I said I'm for freedom.
All right. Now, with social media, though, the advertising on Google and Facebook is stealing a massive portion of the advertising revenue that would be available to Canadian broadcasters. What would you do to help those Canadian broadcasters? Because right now they're being decimated. Global, I think just a few days ago, laid off a whole bunch of people across the country.
Well, I mean, look, Global's problem is that their product has been terrible, if I can be blunt about it. Global News has become another woke media outlet, just like the CBC, and that's why they're losing audiences. So I think they should try to report news and facts and report the information that people want to see, and then they'll have a bigger audience. I don't think that we should step in to favor any particular news outlet over another. And if media want to have, okay, you've succeeded here, independently owned outlet, you're actually preserving your audience. Obviously, you're covering the things people want to see. That's why people watch you. And I believe that individual Canadians should decide what they watch, and that should drive the market.
All right, last question. What is next for you?
We have to bring it home. You know, I'm going to keep selling my message of moving the gatekeepers to build more homes so our young people can have an affordable place to live, capping spending to bring down inflation and interest rates so your dollar goes further, reforming and cutting taxes and clawbacks so that people bring home more of each dollar they earn, and we reward hard work again in this country. So in other words, let's bring it home for Canada.
All right, I lied. This is the last question.
Okay.
Wow. What do you want to cut that income tax rate to?
That'll be in my platform, but it will be lower, and you'll keep more. It'll be more for the working people, the common men and women who do the nation's work. Poilievre government is going to make Canada work for the people who do the work.
All right, I appreciate your time.
Great to be with you.